Discover the Jade Rabbit, Oktokki, a compelling short story by Kim Yu-jeong, one of Korea's most celebrated modern literary figures. First published in 1936, this story masterfully blends humor with the grim reality of poverty during the colonial era. Follow the innocent yet desperate love story of a young man and his neighbor Suki, centered around a small white rabbit that symbolizes hope and unintended sacrifice. Jade Rabbit author Kim Yu-jeong, source Yosong, Women's Monthly, July issue, 1936. I thought about a single rabbit day and night. My head was filled with the question of how I could grow this fellow quickly and make it have babies. This rabbit was a treasure bestowed upon me by God. It was a bitterly cold morning. While I was still playing in my dreams, my mother shook my arm to wake me. I was the type to get pointlessly irritated when woken up, especially since I was chronically late with my morning sleep. I shook off her hand with my elbow and grumbled, "Oh, for goodness sake, I'm dying here." Just as I was throwing this fit, she said, "Don't you want this rabbit then?" And she was gently pulling at me as if to say, "Well, then forget it." In my sleep-addled mind, I wondered if Father had bought some rabbit meat because he'd been craving it after a long time, and Mother was waking me up to feed me. I rubbed my crusty eyes and turned my head, and what did I see? A tiny, pure white jade rabbit was nestled snugly in the folds of my mother's skirt. I rubbed my eyes and sat up hurriedly, asking, "Where did this come from?" "Well, where on earth did it come from?" I asked impatiently. "I went out to wash the rice this morning, and it was huddling there on top of our kitchen range. It probably escaped from someone's house where they were raising it." Mother rubbed her hands over the brazier and looked very happy. She sighed a long sigh, worn down by a life of hardship, saying that since we moved to this place, Sindong-ri, we had suffered nothing but misery. She wondered if the fact that this jade rabbit chose our house out of the 4 families living here meant that our luck might finally change with the new year. However, I had my own separate hopes. I thought that since such a cute jade rabbit had bypassed everyone else to find me, my own fortune must be about to bloom. I took the rabbit from my mother's skirt and pressed it to my mouth, rubbed it against my cheek, and tucked it under my chin. It was truly a cute and beautiful animal. Without even stopping to eat breakfast, and despite my mother grabbing my arm and scolding me, saying, "Are you going to give that to Suki? You're not supposed to give away things that come into your house. Give it here, give it here." I ignored her persistent protests and dashed out the door. I went into the back alley and called Suki to the gate. Of course, we were both shivering, and because she was afraid of her parents, I couldn't go into her room. I called her out quietly and said, "Raise this jade rabbit well," and pulled the fellow out from inside my overcoat. Just as I expected, Suki's eyes went wide and round, and she snatched it up with both hands, kissing it and pressing it to her cheek just as I had done. But when she hugged it tightly to her chest, I turned pale with fright and shouted, "Ah! If you do that, its bones will break and it'll die. You have to hold a rabbit by its ears like this." And I had to teach her how to handle a rabbit. Looking at Suki as she stood there holding the ears as she was told, I wished this house were mine and Suki were my wife. I felt pity for myself when I remembered that it had been ages since I promised to buy her a pair of women's socks, but still hadn't been able to do so. "When this fellow grows up, let's find it a mate and keep getting babies. If we sell those babies one after another, eventually we'll have a lot of money." As I looked up at the rabbit, I couldn't tell if it was male or female. This worried me a bit. "But we have to know what it is to find it a mate," I grumbled to myself. "Well, that's—" Suki blushed slightly and mixed her awkward expression with a laugh. "We'll know when it grows up." "True. Well, raise it well." After returning home, I went to pay my respects to the rabbit every single day. I was very pleased to hear Suki say that the rabbit was changing day by day. "Is I eating well lately?" I would ask. "Yes, I only gave it radish scraps before, but today I gave it cabbage and it ate it so well," Suki replied proudly. I thought that as long as it ate well and didn't get sick, everything would be fine. Sure enough, Suki said, now it runs around so much that it even poops on people who come in, and her dark eyes rolled with excitement. It had become a quite dashing grown-up rabbit. Now it was time to find it a mate. But I returned home worrying about my lack of money. No matter how much I thought about it, there was no way to get the money. I wondered if I should pawn the overcoat I was wearing, but then what would I wear when I went out? While I was hesitating between the two options, about 5 days passed without me being able to visit the rabbit. Then one day, while having dinner, my mother spoke up angrily. I heard from Goom-chil's mother that Suki ate that rabbit. I was startled by her outburst. Mother had once proposed a marriage match to Suki's family, even though I'd said no, only to be rejected. They claimed Suki was still too young, but their real intention was to marry their daughter into a wealthy family. Since Mother knew this and felt insulted, she detested them intensely. Of course, how could those people know how to cherish a living creature? Did she really eat the rabbit? Fire sparked in my eyes as I ran outside, but I couldn't believe it. I didn't think Suki was the type to eat a rabbit she had even made a multicolored silk vest for. However, when I called Suki out and asked her to show me the rabbit for just a moment, she stood there with a bright red face without saying a word. It seemed certain that they had eaten it. If this was the case, it was clear that this girl's heart had already changed toward me. If she hadn't forgotten our secret promise to live together, how could she dare eat the rabbit that I cherished so much? I glared at her with hawk eyes for a while and said, "I've come to get the rabbit. Give my rabbit back." "I don't have it." Suki looked like she was about to cry. Then she dropped her head and said, "My father," without me knowing. She couldn't even finish her sentence out of shame. In reality, Suki had been very ill for about 4 days and couldn't eat. Her father got terrified because his daughter, who earned money working at the tobacco factory, was sick and starving. Since they weren't in a position to buy meat to nourish her, he had eventually caught and fed her that jade rabbit without her knowing. But since I didn't know the inside story, I hated Suki for standing there dazed after eating someone else's rabbit. Was she so hungry she had to eat the jade rabbit? I said again, "Hand over the jade rabbit, I'm taking it." I ate it. Only then did she speak plainly, and tears that had been welling up finally fell. Then, as if remembering something, she fumbled at her waist and pulled out a wallet. When we had secretly gotten engaged, I didn't have money for a gold ring, so I gave her the 15 John wallet I bought at the night market to carry around instead. She handed it back and turned her head away coldly. That wretched girl. How could she act so cold after eating my rabbit? But I knew that if I said any more, I would be the one losing out. I hurriedly pushed the wallet back into her waistband, through the front of her clothes, and ran home as fast as I could, fearing she might follow me. Since she ate my jade rabbit, no matter how much her father opposed us, and even if she herself felt like she didn't want to, she would now have no choice but to become my wife. Thinking this way, I carefully weighed it all out under my covers and finally realized what a truly grateful animal that jade rabbit was to me. Now you are definitely mine. Through the Jade Rabbit, Kim Yu-jeong captures the irony of human resilience. The protagonist's final realization, interpreting a tragic loss as a spiritual bond, is a classic example of the author's signature, hahak, humor and pathos. How did you interpret the ending? Does the rabbit represent lost hope or a new beginning? Share your thoughts in the comments below.